you get your shot, you can be a guy that lost a couple times and you still get there. So I would say for Sanad and Sage, you know, they're pretty early in their pro career. They both had great amateur careers. You know, Sage keeps taking the toughest fights, right? Like he's got 2 losses, but the 2 guys he lost to are undefeated.
Yeah.
And, you know, the next fight that he's taking is with a 6'4" black belt in jiu-jitsu.
Exactly.
Who's like, you know, and there's, you know, everybody says, oh, there's levels to this, but there, you know, there's levels to jiu-jitsu, and like Sanad is a high level black belt that's actively competing.
Correct.
Internationally. Like he's phenomenal. Right. So, you know, that was always what we tried to do is, you know, find real fights like that. Right. And, so that's one that I have no idea how it's going to go, but regardless of which guy wins that fight or loses that fight, it's not going to kill either one of them, right? Like they can go out and you know, it's not like this one loss is going to set them back so far. And we love guys that are willing to kind of take a risk and take those fights. And I don't know, as far as how we get those fights and other people don't, I mean, I don't know, we just ask people. Right? Like we keep offering fights like that. And if we offer them a tough fight and they turn it down, we offer them another tough fight. And then, you know, eventually they take one of them we offer, or they, you know, like.
Or they weed themselves out.
Yeah.
A lot of guys just don't want to fight tough guys. I had a list of people that I really thought were the top guys in New England, and I really wanted to get them on the card. And then one kind of went through it and looked at their records, and I talked to Rick about it and said, you know, what do you think? He said, there's you know, guys that are going to be better fights. You know, we can match guys that are better, and that's kind of what he's done. You know, any fight on our card, we used to do an intermission. I don't think we're going to do it with television this time. It kind of changes things up, but any fight after intermission at our last events when we used to do them, so the last 6 or 8 fights could be a main event on anybody's card.
Yeah,
and that was what Rick really did well, was making sure that you know, everything from that point on could just, you know, they're in real fights. Everybody's getting a 50-50 chance in this thing, and nobody's getting overmatched, and nobody's getting built up, and nobody's getting, you know, he's just done a real good job with that stuff. And this fight card in particular is going to be the same type of way.
That's what it looks like. You know, oftentimes when I am reviewing fights, the first thing I want to figure out is, like, where is this fight going to take place in terms of, like, where in the ring is this fight likely to take place? And in multiple situations while looking through this fight card, I could not figure it out. Even with this fight, you have obviously a guy who Sage is super active. Yeah. He maybe this is the 4th fight this year for Sage, 1 amateur, and this would be the 3rd pro. Maybe
I'd have to go back and look, but yeah, he's
all
been
pro.
pretty active,
Super active, and he's great on the feet. He has some skills on the ground. Probably don't want the fight to be on the ground, but then it's going to be on the opponent to get the fight there. Yep. And I don't know if he's going to want to necessarily go there right away with that length and that range, and he uses his range really well on the feet. He might want to try to keep it there, where Sage likes to get in and really get it within striking range, try to close the show that way. So I couldn't even figure out where some of these fights were going to take place in my head as I'm playing these out, and I think that's always a good indicator of how well the matchmaker.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, where the matchmaker did. So jumping into real quick the next fight, because I think this one may hit home with you a little more, was the Guerrero fight. So we have Guerrero going up against Jamie Campbell, right? So Jacob Guerrero, Jamie Campbell, and this is a real interesting contrast, right? Because with Jamie Campbell, you have somebody who has been around fighting for a really long time, has trained with some absolute killers.
Yeah, he's really got a ton of experience.
Yeah, knows the sport in and out. And then he's going up against really a guy who grew up in our social media generation, right? Where he's not new to the fight game by any means.
He's got like 12,000 Instagram followers posting avocados and shit.
Exactly, right?
You look at his Instagram page and you're like, how did this happen?
Yeah, he's one of those guys that you're like, he looks like he's just constantly having the best time of his life.
Yeah.
But he is, in comparison, new to the fight game. from Panama, I believe.
Yep.
He moved to the U.S.
Yeah.
Really,
I wouldn't say he's new to the fight game necessarily. I mean, I think he started fighting 7 years
pretty,
ago.
yeah,
or
pretty,
7 or 8 years
yeah. He started fighting pretty early in his life, just in comparison, new to the
Yeah.
fight
Oh,
game,
yeah,
right? But by no means a lack of skills. Moved to New York, maybe,
Yep.
to train.
Yeah, he's in Manhattan. He actually trains at Tiger Schulman.
Wow.
which is a fantastic
Yeah.
gym.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
absolutely.
He
Some
actually-
monsters come out of there.
He
Yeah.
actually had some. I can't remember if it was an Instagram story or if it was a post. But he trains a lot with Hurricane Shane Burgos. So there were training sessions with the two of them like this week, right? So it's he does a real good job of again, I was kind of poking fun with the avocado thing, but like he posts a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah.
Too. And there's another guy on the card that I'll talk about too about his social media, but like we had talked about it here, previously, where like so much social media is so different now. It doesn't have to be like, it can be anything. Like,
Exactly.
Another guy on the card, he posts pictures of himself on the train every day drinking a coffee on his Instagram.
Yeah.
Right? So, but yeah, I would say like Jacob's working out with an excellent gym.
Well, not to cut you off, but like that was the thing that I was getting at. So like you look at his social media, and it's a lot like with these
looks like a
kids.
model.
Yeah, when you look at their social media,
He's
you're
got a
like,
page
do they?
with his wife?
Yeah, like when do they have time to train? Do not by any means think that him posting about other stuff means that he isn't an absolute killer. Because this kid is although he's very young, he's very measured, great counter puncher. He'll wait for you to make mistakes and then he'll pounce on them. Like he's a darn good fighter. So I just wanted to touch on that really quickly because it's funny when if you go look at his social media, you're like, this guy looks like the guy I would want to go on a vacation somewhere with him and my friends. Yeah. And then you find out like
interesting contrast with him and Jamie too.
Yes, and that's for me that was the craziest thing is he looks like he's a fighter in Jacob Guerrero that is pretty beyond his years when he's in there. But then you have a guy who really has trained hard since Jacob was likely a kid, right? So you have somebody who fights as though he's been fighting for 15 years, 20 years against a guy who has been. And it's interesting contrast.
Yeah, it's a really good one. I mean, even if you just like, if you compare their social media, vastly different, obviously, but their personalities in general, right? Like you said, like Jacob looks like someone you'd want to go on vacation with, whereas like Jamie's the guy that like, if you're talking about, which one of your okay, you get in a fight in an alley with 7 guys, you can bring one guy. It's Jamie.
Oh, I'm bringing him.
Right, like Jamie's he was like the toughest kid in high school. He was the star athlete, right? Like, he's just a guy that looks tough.
Yes.
Like he's got shin tattoos and shit, right? So like, he absolutely looks like a guy who should be a professional
He's
fighter.
built like an 18-year-old kid. I mean, he's a freak.
Yeah.
He's
in fantastic shape.
Talk about training, the level of guys that he's training with. He was out there with Matt Brown getting him ready for his last fight. Yeah. You got to be good to get out, to be part of that camp. And
they don't quit over there.
no.
Yeah. Even just when he's doing the filming for he does the dynamic striking, right? So you see, on his Instagram every couple days, it's like, okay, this is him hitting mitts with Henry Cejudo, right? So he's picking up little pieces of knowledge from him. And
Exactly.
even though he hasn't fought in a while.
No, he's remained to be a
still-
student of the sport, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
they had Tyson on there recently.
Yes, they did, yeah.
They did the. It's at Dynamic Striking. They do instructionals, and they bring on everybody. The top guys in the world. They had Teddy Atlas on there. They Henry Cejudo. They get these really, really high level guys to come in and explain. They're part of that BJJ Fanatics, which is they bring in the top guys in the world in jiu-jitsu, and Jamie is the face of the Dynamic Striking. So it's pretty cool to see the guys that he's getting the opportunity to rub elbows with and train with. And he travels around, and he's getting his training in by literally going to the best gyms in the country and working with the best guys. And then he does his work, and then he trains with if he's there for a week, he trains with them for a week, and then takes off. So that fight, I'm a big Jamie fan, and I think it's going to be one of the funner fights. I'm really excited
Absolutely.
about it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. And that's one of those fights that when I look at it, regardless of what happens, it's going to be like, yeah, that's of course. Yeah, of course that was what was going to happen. Like,
regardless of the outcome, yeah.
Regardless of who wins.
Exactly.
Jamie, look,
exactly.
undefeated, sick, right? Jacob, yeah, duh. He's training with Tiger Schulman. He's been getting in rounds with you know, with,
With some of
with
the
Shane
best, yeah.
Burgos. Like,
Yeah.
regardless of who wins that fight, it's going to be like, should have seen that one coming, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's-
and back to what you said, a loss here does not change what you are. Like you said, that's the one thing that MMA has gotten correct that boxing didn't necessarily do a great job at, and specifically in the last 25, 30 years is like it's okay to lose. You're going to take a lot of information from those losses and push them forward. I mean, a great example is, a current, well, I guess not current UFC champion, since he lost the belt on the scale, but Charles Oliveira, right?
lost a bunch in the UFC, yeah.
Yeah, he is a great definition of how the sport treats losses and how you can rebound from it. He was a guy who was known for quitting when things got really tough.
Not anymore.
Yeah, and now he's walking through punches. He's really challenging
dropped in every
guys.
fight and keeps
Gets
coming
dropped in
out.
every fight and keeps coming out the winner. So I think that is a great point in terms of what you can do in the sport even after a loss. And they've always said, right, in sports that you learn more from a loss than a win. So I've never quite understood that, why losses weighed so heavily in certain areas when you can, obviously take a lot of information from that and bring it back.
You look back at Roberto Duran when he quit, against Sugar Ray Leonard. They never let him live that down. The guy's legitimately probably the best lightweight that's ever lived.
Yeah.
And they got him. You know what they did with that deal was they had a rematch clause in there. They knew that he went back to Panama. He won the title the first time, and he went back to Panama, and they knew that he was a big drinker and big partier, and everybody, the Panama, he was the biggest thing that ever happened over there. And so they brought him out every night, and fed him, and brought him to dinners, and all the stories about him, all the craziness down there. And then he had to come back and fight, and he looked like a completely different fighter when he came back. So it was, it wasn't unexpected that he was going to lose. And when he said no mas, that was it. I mean, to this day, they still talk about it. No mas. And
they'll never let it go.
yeah. And he's legitimately one of the best fighters in the world ever. And it's just terrible that happened to him. And you get guys that that fight in the UFC that got 5 or 6 losses, and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything to anybody.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about Jacob, just like to stay on that, is he had mentioned something. I don't know if it was months back or years back, but he mentioned something about the opportunity of the United States and the opportunity that it would give them for just financially and just for publicity and taking yourself very seriously as a fighter in a smaller place in Panama. I don't know what their population is, but it isn't quite the eyes that you get here. So now he's made his move here. And is this his pro debut? Because I know he fought a lot amateur over there.
Yep.
So now we have a fighter who is going to be on your inaugural event, who is
on Fight Pass,
on Fight Pass, who is making his debut. Yep. That's tremendous.
That's crazy.
That's tremendous.
against another guy who's going to fight him exactly how he wants, right? Like
exactly.
Both of these guys, they're both kickboxers. They're both MMA. They're both MMA guys, right?
Yeah.
So
they can do everything.
They both have wrestling. They both have jiu-jitsu, but their primary game is kickboxing.
Yeah.
Like, and that's one thing that similar to what I said earlier about how we get good fights because we keep asking people, right? And we ask people for good fights. It's kind of what Jacob did, right? Like, he came to this country, and I watched one of his interviews recently, and he was talking about he, as soon as he got here, he was talking to management companies, right? Saying, look, I'm gonna be good I'm gonna be a big thing.
Yeah.
Like this is what I deserve. I don't need to go fight like some bum at some show that nobody's gonna see. I'm a talented guy. I should be someone that you're willing to partner with. And eventually he asked enough people, and then he found a good management team.
Yeah, he found a great management team.
Yeah. And he found a great management team to work with him. He's got sponsors. I mean, how many guys, before their pro debut have the kind of social media following he has sponsors, has a management company?
Not many.
So yeah, that's just one of those things that, he's been here, he hasn't had a fight in, I think COVID kind of screws everything up. Right?
Yeah.
But he's someone that he didn't just rush into what what would be a bad opportunity for him. Like he went out, he took his time, he found a good management company, he wanted to take a real fight. So yeah, it's again, you keep asking for what you want enough, eventually it happens.
Yeah, and honestly, like that's tremendous. So for him to make sure that he was ready first, and then to say I don't want guys that are set up to make me look good and lose.